First of all, I have to start off with a confession. The title of my talk asks you to trust me, I'm a designer. Well, the confession is that I'm not a designer, so there goes the trust you may have had. Having said all of that, I have run and developed a couple of businesses, so I'm hoping that makes me a bit more objective when I talk about the benefits that design can bring to companies. On the other hand, I have to be honest with you, I did start off way back as a lawyer, so there goes the trust. So being an intelligent and perceptive audience, and one that I hope is susceptible to flattery, you'll have picked up the challenge in that title. Of course, I'm arguing that it's not good enough to expect enterprises or governments to make decisions about design investment based solely on trust in the creative power of designers. We have to make the case in a more rounded and more quantified way. Now, at the same time, I'm going to argue we have to resist the pressure only to value things that you can measure and quantify. But before I launch into that, and just in case you think that I think that design is all about commercial impact and measures and data with no emotional component, have a look at this for emotional component. Now what you're seeing here is not an Apple advert. These are all photos which have been posted on a website called iPodLounge.com. And I guess what this demonstrates is the amazing emotional connection that people have with their iPods. It's a fantastically designed product that people feel it in their hearts. And of course, what we all know, I think, here, being sort of within the design world, is that the great thing about the Apple products, the Apple range, is not just the physical appearance of them, it's the melding of the technology and also the services that surround it. So iTunes was integral to the design process of the iPod. And I suppose the question you can ask is, how could you ever disentangle the return on design investment here from all the rest of Apple's investment in technology, marketing, distribution, and so on? And I think my answer might be that where the results are so clear as this, you perhaps don't have to waste too much time picking all those numbers apart. And you can see the same story happening now with the iPhone. I was in the Apple store here in Chicago yesterday, and there are people there who quite clearly, and I heard people say, I love my iPhone. So that emotional connection is not just superficial, it's actually very deep. It is, to some extent, moves towards the meaning that we heard from Darryl. And I think that's really important. So that's a kind of counterbalance to saying you have to measure everything. So, why do we at the Design Council in the UK carry out research on the impact and the role of design? And there are 4 key reasons which are up there on the screen. First of all, is to demonstrate to business leaders why it's in their own commercial interest to use design as a business process and a tool. Secondly, it's to give evidence to designers so that when you're talking to clients, you can persuade them based on evidence rather than just saying, trust me. Thirdly, it's to help us as an organisation to make our own strategy for the future based on real understanding of our marketplace. And then the final one is about persuading governments in the UK to invest in design promotion and support for business, so that when they're looking at how to continue to develop the UK economy, they understand that an investment in design activity is core and crucial to all of that. So do those 4 purposes on there demand different kinds of design research? And fundamentally I'd say they don't. It's the same story in every case. First of all, prove the impact of design in individual companies or individual cases, and then you carry on and support and validate all of that and extrapolate from that with some statistical data. And then in our case, the additional step you need to take to persuade governments and policymakers is to take all of that and surround it with some kind of econometric analysis that gives a sense of broader economic impact across the country. Having said that, however, most policymakers I've ever come across are also smart enough to understand somewhere in their guts that you arrive at national impact through having individual pieces of company activity. That's not just about having a very complex formula to work all of this out. The argument I just described is how come our Prime Minister, when he was our Finance Minister, when he said this a couple of years ago. Understanding design is not incidental to modern economies, it's part of but integral to modern economies, not part of success, but it's the heart of success, and not a sideshow, but absolutely at the centre. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is describe the story that we tell to businesses to drive up their own use of design, and how we provide ammunition for designers. And then I'll say a little bit about how we then go on to use that to shape industrial and economic policy. So the iPod example I gave you is, of course, slightly light-hearted, but it's an important reminder of the emotional and aesthetic component of impactful and effective design. But how about if love for an iPod is a bit too geeky for some people and some of the people we deal with? Well, how about this? What's the difference in price, would you say, between those two? Well, here's more of a clue. Difference in price between those two. Well, that's the answer. That's what I would have paid if I booked last week to fly here from London. Economy, $653, and in club, $9,000. Massive, massive difference. Now, the fact is, whatever meal you get, whatever seat you sit in, you still get from London to Chicago in exactly the same amount of time. But the investment that British Airways in this case, but other airlines as well, have put into the design of the product and the service and the experience gives the airline a massive premium. Yes, of course, the volume of space you occupy and the amount of support, extra staff time you get accounts for some of the difference in cost, but fundamentally the premium is nearly all down to design there. So the question is, how convincing is that big picture example of airlines or Apple to a small manufacturer of commodity products in Detroit or in Doncaster who's never knowingly used design or design process? Can they see how those ideas might apply to them? Well, the answer is probably not. So how about this? This is a product that's been around in the UK for many years, because I'm the Animal Boys Lamb, and I think I'm sure you have similar products here. It's been a design classic in the UK since about 1920. By 2001, cheap imports of very similar products made the company behind this completely non-viable. They couldn't make money. And they got engaged then with some designers and design process. And now Simon Terry, who runs that business, proudly talks about the work of Kenneth Grange, who many of you will know. And that resulted in a redesign of what was already an iconic product. And they now sell the newly designed product for about $500. And that's about 5 times as much as the old product. And the great thing is those products are flying off the shelves. So there's a small scale example. I'm going to show you in a second a short film that sums up a lot of the experiences and benefits that small businesses recognise from using design effectively. I'm going to show you some comments from a gentleman called Graham Birchall. He runs a very small company in the UK called Charles, and they make household chemicals, very fundamentally dull products. And I love using examples where the product itself is not that exciting, but actually the way that business uses design turns it into something desirable and interesting. We work with him at the Design Council in the pilot stages of a program that we created called Designing Demand, which is a business support program. And his company simply received, as part of that program, some intensive mentoring in their use of design because they didn't know what on earth to do. They had to make the investment in design activities. They weren't being given free design activity. The other thing you should bear in mind when you watch this film is that Graham had never used design in any way before. He had no understanding of design. So I think that adds, for me, some force to his comments. Now this is the real high wire bit. Let's see what happens. Black screen. Can we get the film to play? The hand is a good sign. That's a bad sign.
Chose, we put our major brand on the table, which was, a risk for us if we got it wrong. Also, we put the most that we could afford to invest in design. Now, at that time, we earmarked about £40,000. Now, to a big company, that doesn't sound like very much money, but to us, that was essentially our year's profit. But it was a figure that if things went wrong, we could survive from it, and that was important. In the end, we actually spent quite a bit more than that. We spent probably in total near £80,000-90,000. But in terms of return, that we paid for itself within 6 months. We set ourselves, a target that if we gained one more product into any of the major retailers, the project would pay for itself. In the event, we got 2 products into the top 2 major retailers, and hence the payback was huge. And importantly, I think the issue of having good design is that good design lasts the test of time, and we are still benefiting from that financially. 3 or 4 years further down, and in fact, that will continue for many years to come. Firstly, we were able to increase our selling prices by something like 25%, which clearly had a huge benefit to our profit margins. Over and above that, though, our sales are also increasing by something like 25% compound year on year, and we expect that to continue, and in fact may even accelerate further in the next few years. And one of the reasons we think they will accelerate further is because we're now using the design to start talking to Europe. Prior to design, we were very much a UK-based manufacturer selling to UK companies. We're now starting to dialogues with other big European retailers, and even having dialogues as far afield as Australia, which is a direct result of the design process.
So it's quite easy to sort of dismiss that as a piece of interesting and nice sort of communications design, but actually what you saw there, what you saw him talking about, was the way that engaging the design process increased the ambition of his business and gave him some really serious strategic thinking about how you would develop business in the future. And it's a really important example for me, because he's a great advocate of the design now. He really, we wheel him out all over the place, and he really connects with the people we're trying to influence. But in my experience, if you just show people great examples, particularly if they haven't used design before, it's very easy for them to turn around and be sceptical, to say, well, yeah, that's a very particular case, but in my company that would never happen. My business is very different. And I don't think that's an entirely unreasonable response. So I believe that you have to support those impressive examples with some more convincing and robust evidence and data. Something that gives a bigger picture, gives quantified evidence that one way or another will show that companies who use design do better than those who don't. Now, there's a whole range of compelling facts and figures to choose from. I'm not going to go through a lot of it. I'll show you towards the end a website where, if you want, you can find a lot more of this information. I just want to give you a taste drop, a few examples. I'm going to start with Design Index, because it's one of the simplest and clearest pieces of data that we have. It's also highly quantified. And you heard earlier on Darryl mentioning that markets value design. Well, here is an example of that. Design Index measures the share price performance of 63 design-intensive companies who are listed on the London Stock Exchange. It measured it over a full 10-year period. The group of companies, which is the red line at the top, has outperformed the FTSE 100 and the FTSE All-Share Indices, which are the ones down the bottom, by 200% over the past 10 years. It's a full 200%. So that means if you invested $1,000 in the main FTSE 100 market in 1994, that would have been worth just over $1,500 by 2004. But if you put that same $1,000 into design index companies, then over the same period, your investment would have grown to $3,600. So a very strong piece of evidence that shows across a range of businesses the way design can support them. Each year we also do a big piece of research to look at how UK companies understand design, how they use design, and the benefits that they see from it. I'm going to give you 3 slides with just a few headlines that show you, give you a flavour of that. So first of all, rapidly growing businesses. So these are businesses that are doing very well. And how do they understand and use design? Well, 39% of rapidly growing companies will say design is integral to what they do, which is very interesting when you compare that to only 7% of static businesses saying design is integral. If you look at design investment, 70% of rapidly growing businesses have increased their design investment, but only 31% of businesses as a whole in the UK have done so in that period. And then finally there, how crucial do companies say that design is? Well, 15% of UK companies will see design as crucial to what they do as a whole. But if you look at rapidly growing companies, 3 times as many, 47%, will see design as being crucial to their success. And that provides a very clear association between rapid growth and an understanding of design's significance. And then if you cut the data in a different way and look at businesses where design is integral, businesses who say design is integral to what we do, then you'll find powerful business benefits coming through there. Now, first of all, I should say, I find it very depressing from our research. We find that only 2 out of every 5, 40% of UK companies have introduced any new product or service in the previous 3 years. It makes you wonder what they're doing. But what's very interesting coming out of that is that in companies where design is integral, 83%, twice as many, have introduced new products and services. A very clear connection, not surprisingly to us, I'd say, but it's very surprising to other people, a connection between seeing design as integral and using that to develop your business. Competitiveness, pretty important measure. And where design is integral to a company, more than 3/4 of them have increased their competitiveness and turnover directly as a result of design activity. And then how do businesses compete? Well, 2/3 of UK businesses say that they have to compete mainly on price, and that's not going to be an uncommon story. You'll find that, I'm sure, in businesses here, you find it all over the world, mostly price is a key competitive factor. But if you look then at the range of businesses who see design as integral to what they do, only 43% will see design as the key factor in competing. Then, added value, the way you use design to add value to your products and services, becomes much more central. You can see that that's a spiral of improvement in the business rather than decline by cutting margins. And then we've recently taken a look at a group of businesses that we call design alert businesses. Those are businesses who put their hand up and say, we have seen a really strong influence and impact of design across a whole range of performance measures in our business. So these design alert businesses bring out some very interesting results. For every £100 that a design alert business invests in design activity, they will see an increase in their turnover of £225 in the first year. So a very direct, immediate result, and that result, as you heard Graham Birchall talk about, then obviously continues into future years. And on average, a design alert business will increase their market share by 6.3% through using design. That's over and above where they would have been otherwise. All of that data and a lot more is on Fact Finder, which is a tool on our website created for designers and for business advisors to allow them to compile reports and information to present to clients to convince them. There's something that we haven't yet put up onto Fact Finder because we haven't published the research. It's being published actually next week. So I can only give you the sort of very top line results. We looked specifically at how businesses add value, how they add value to their core activity. So core activity and then how they add value around that. And then we looked to see what the role of design was in adding value and what impact that had on performance. And then we gave us some very striking results. First of all, this illustrates to you the way in which companies talk about adding value. So 92% of businesses who do add value will say they do it through enhanced customer relationships. And going down the list, product and service design, that is product and service design that goes beyond the core product. 84% of businesses will add value that way, and so on down that list. It gives a sense of the ways in which people see adding value. So, what's the impact and place of design in all of this? Well, there's the headline of it. The small block on the left is businesses who don't add any value. The businesses in the middle are the ones who do find ways to add value to their core products and services, but do it without using design. And then what we found was those businesses who add value to what they do by using a design process will see much bigger results, much stronger results. So the message is clearly doing nothing is dangerous, adding some value is good. If you add value through a design process, that's better. And it'll be obvious to us why that is, because it's about understanding your real user needs and adding the value in a way that actually is truly useful to your customers. And then finally here, a bit more detail on where they see that value. So companies will report a really strong impact on employment, on profit, on new markets, market share, turnover, and overall competitiveness. And across the board, those who use design do much better. So across the board, 20% of those who add value without a designer will see their turnover increase greatly. But where they use a designer, 40% will see a great increase in turnover. Or one more, overall competitiveness. Businesses who add value without using a designer will see, 26% of those will see a great impact on competitiveness. But if they use a designer to add that value, 43% see that increase in competitiveness. So again, a very strong story for enlightened businesses using design effectively. So, we've looked at how you demonstrate design's power through large-scale examples like Apple and British Airways. We looked at some smaller examples like lamps, and we've all supported that by some statistics. Now that one feels pretty convincing to me, I believe. But however convinced you are or I am, there are some sceptics who will start to demand exceptional levels of proof for the impact of design spending. And I don't think we need to respond always to those unreasonable demands. We can sometimes actually say, no, enough's enough. And that's simply, in my view, this is my argument, that there are very few areas of business investment that can show absolutely clear, demonstrable returns on investment that are identified just to that investment. Let me explain what I mean. So, for example, which company can prove that a marketing spend or an advertising spend of, say, $1 million is twice as effective as spending $500,000? Viscount Leverhulme, who set up Lever Brothers, recognised that in the late 19th century. Although I have to own up and say that that same quote is also attributed to the US retailer John Wanamaker. Or if you look at investment in staff development and staff training, how can you ever show a direct link between that investment and the results of that business? I don't think you can. But yet, quite rightly, people carry on investing in those areas of activity in the business. So what about the billions that businesses spend on strategic management consultancy? Where's the scientific return on investment there? The very best that the big brains of management consultancy can come up with are some kinds of proxy indicators. And usually they're helped along simply by the fact that the chief executive of the company probably used to be a management consultant. So they understand what they're talking about. And sadly, there's not many designers running businesses, running large-scale businesses. And then finally, what about one piece of legal advice or accountancy advice? Can you ever prove that that was quantifiably better than another? You can't, and I don't think it matters. And people in business, of course, accept those levels of complexity and uncertainty. They understand that developing a business is about making decisions based on the best information you have, not based on perfect information. Now, of course, none of that, I would say, is to argue that we shouldn't try and quantify the benefits and impact of design, but it is to say that we should resist any desire on the part of sceptics to demand greater levels of proof about design investment than any other areas of investment. We should be confident enough to say, to use that argument to say we will rise to the levels of proof that other parts of design business investments have, but we won't go beyond that. Now finally, just a few words about how economists extrapolate that enterprise-based information to show wider impact. Now what I should say, and I think it will become very clear to you very quickly, is that I'm not an economist, and so I can describe the process to you, but I can't promise to answer any really technical questions about what I'm about to describe. That's one model that economists that we work with will use to identify the economic impact and the flow of design. First of all, they look at the immediate creation of jobs at the very centre there. So the business that invests in design, how many jobs do they create? And then you move out beyond that through the awareness of skills that people pick up. And those those skills are then transferable. So the skills that a design manager gains in a business when they move somewhere else will then be transferable. So that's an extra benefit to the economy more broadly. Then there's indirect and induced employment. That's indirect employment is where I, as a company who's invested in design, will spend money with you as another business to buy services in to do what I do. So I'll create employment in your business. And then induced employment is where my employees will go out and spend their wages and create more jobs. All of this comes together to form what economists sort of see as the magic number, which is gross value added. That is the top level measure of contribution to the economy that producers and industries and sectors make. And then they can see wider effects that go beyond that, which is the spillover effect. So where an innovation, which I make, will become public knowledge or public use in the next few years, then other people will start taking advantage of that. So the investment I make today will have knock-on effects in the years ahead. Now that kind of analysis reassures policymakers. It gives them the evidence they need to support design activity within businesses. It's a powerful influence on all of them. But equally, I think when you're dealing with those kinds of decision makers in governmental policy, you also have to remind them about their own life experience, not reduce it all simply to a set of numbers. Because people of that sort will know in their hearts very strongly that good design will make products and services better, and will make products and services more sustainable and more useful. And therefore, they can intuitively understand that that will create strong value. And it's important to hold on to both the numbers and the life experience and the intuition that these people have. So, here's the web address I promised you. Design Council website, I think a lot of useful and interesting knowledge in there, written by some of the world's leading experts, not by any means just by British experts. And if you want to go straight to the research part of that, just put / research. So that's that. I hope that gives you some sense of the way that you can construct an argument for the impact of design. I'm happy to take some questions.